Just 2 years after winning the Champions League final, Chelsea are in crisis. They finished in the bottom half of the Premier League, they fired their Champions League winning manager as well as his successor during one season, and their squad is filled with just way too many players. New owner Todd Bowley decided to spend a ton of money to replenish the squad, and with that, the team just became saturated with players, which made training virtually impossible and made a lot of those players unhappy with their playing time. Chelsea are in a very bad situation right now, but I think it's one that can be improved. I'm Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today I'm going to be talking about how I'd fix Chelsea. The main thing Chelsea needs to do is drastically reduce the amount of players in their squad. But keep in mind, this is a team that finished 12th. Despite all the spending they already did, they need some talent, and signings will need to be made. But before we can do that, the squad just needs to be reduced. I have it counted as 48 players in and around the first team, and compare that with Man City, who just won a treble with about a 23-man squad, and I'm not sure Perone counts, and I don't think Cole Palmer played a meaningful minute. Chelsea have a good amount of injury prone and inexperienced players, so I'm going to be keeping the squad around 25, which is more than Man City. Also, we have to keep in mind that Chelsea have a new manager, Mauricio Pochettino. Pochettino did a very good job at Tottenham with a shoestring budget. I'm excited to see what he can do when he's actually getting back at Chelsea. Now, Pochettino plays with a four at the back, which means a lot of players in that squad are going to be a lot less versatile. We also have to keep in mind that Chelsea don't have Europe this season, so squad depth is a bit less important than it would be for them typically. Lastly, there are some squad building regulations that the Premier League has, but I don't see them being relevant to us, so I'm not going to go over them. Now, let's start trimming down the squad. Some players have already left Chelsea. First of them is N'Golo Kante. It's a bit sad to see him go to Saudi Arabia, considering how great of a player he was in his day, but with him getting up there in age and how many injuries he's had, it makes sense for him to want to go to a less intense league. Koulibaly is also following him to Saudi Arabia. Great player in his day for Napoli, but Chelsea just signed him too late in his career, and it's really lucky that they were able to get a good deal for him. Now, Bakayoko has also been released, second video in a row he cameoed, and Dennis Zakaria and Jao Felix have both returned from their loans. Then there are some players who look like they're out the door. We'll start out with two more players going to Saudi Arabia, Edouard Mendy and Hakim Ziyech. Starting off with Mendy, and it's a bit disappointing to see him go to Saudi Arabia. There was a time when he looked like he was a borderline world-class keeper and just so reliable for Chelsea. But Kepa ended up winning the job, and knowing Mendy's career path, I think it makes sense for him to want to set up his family for life, or honestly lives, but I feel like he had more to give. Same with Hakim Ziyech, but I think that Ziyech would do very well under Pochettino, and I think Chelsea are going to need a like-for-like swap for him and sign another player. Again, it's disappointing. At least with Koulibaly and Conte, they've kind of cemented their legacy as very good players, but with Ziyech, I feel like he had more to give, and it's disappointing to see him going to Saudi Arabia like this. Cesar Azpilicueta, club captain, looks like he's head to Inter. He had a great career at Chelsea, but I feel like now is the right time for him to go, and with a lot of Premier League players extending their career in Italy, I think it's a good call. Then Mateo Kovacic looks like he's heading to Man City. Now, with Kovacic, I can see him not fitting in great with Pochettino's system, but giving Pep Guardiola another player when you're going to be in a title challenge with them, I'm not sure about that call, but the squad does need to be reduced. Then Kai Havertz looks like he's on his way to Arsenal. Now, Havertz, he will always have a legacy at Chelsea, being the guy who scored the game winning goal for them in the Champions League final. But it does seem like it's time for him to go. He was played out of position at striker a lot for them, and he didn't do a great job there. He offers a lot, but Chelsea's a team that needs goals at the moment. And with them bringing in a replacement already, I don't think that Havertz would be the best there. I think that if he can regain his confidence, he can have a lot of success at Arsenal, but I think it was time for him to go. Then two academy players for Chelsea look like they're on their way out. Starting off, we have Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Now, you can see the Crystal Palace jerseys in the background. I know how good Loftus-Cheek can be when he's at his best, but after an injury he had, he really hasn't looked like the same player, and I think Chelsea are pretty lucky to be able to get him out for the money that they did. And then Mason Mount looks like he's head to Manchester United. Now, I'm not sure about this. He could easily end up staying, but I think he wants to leave, and because of that, I'm not going to be including him in this squad. Then there are some other players who just need to leave. Maling Sarr, they have better options at center back. Baba Ramon, Chelsea might just have to bite the bullet and release him. Callum Hudson-Odoi, man, he had potential once, but it just really doesn't look like it's going to work out for him. Ethan Ampadu, there's a world where he could stay as a squad player, but I feel like for Ampadu, he needs to find a consistent home and actually nail down a position for him to really reach his potential. Then Christian Pulisic, I'm from the United States, know what he can do at his best, but it's really not worked out for Chelsea outside of that post-lockdown performance. So I think it is time for him to go to find consistent playing time. And then Aubameyang, he looks like he's on his way out. I feel like even if he doesn't get sold, he was at Arsenal, he saw the Özil treatment. I feel like that's what's due for him. So I feel like Aubameyang's going to be on his way out. Lastly, there are some players who could easily be loaned out or comfortably play with the youth teams, so I'm not going to be including them for this. With that, the squad looks a lot more manageable now, but keep in mind, we're going to need to sign players as well. So with that, I think the squad should be trimmed down even further. But before we sell anybody, I think there are some players who could be loaned out pretty easily. And three that stand out are Caicedo, Chukwuemeka, and Fofana. Well, David Fofana, need to specify. Caicedo is coming off a very successful U20 World Cup campaign, and before that, he had a strong loan at Reading as well. And with all the momentum his career is building, I think it'd be best for him to continue to get playing time, and then maybe next season he'll be able to compete for a spot in the first team. Then for Chukwuemeka, I look at him and I don't think he'll be contributing much to the squad this season, and I think him getting playing time is much more valuable than sitting on the bench. And then with David Fofana, I don't see him playing at all this year after not playing much last year, so him getting a loan and playing time makes sense. There are other players that I considered, one being Levi Colwill, who was loaned out last season. He had a very good spell at Brighton. I think there's an argument to be made that having consistent playing time would really help him, but I think he's an immensely talented player. He's been one of England's standouts at the U20 Euro going on right now, and I think there's a place for him in Chelsea's first team, so I'm going to have him stay. Malo Gusto is another guy who was loaned out last season, but he has to be Reece James's backup. And from what I've been hearing, Andrew Santos is going to be involved with the first team this year, so keep an eye out on him. He might just have a breakout season. The toughest position for me was actually the backup left back. Right now, Chelsea has Ben Chilwell, who's the surefire starter, but behind him, there are three players to consider: Mark Cucurella, Lewis Hall, and Ian Matson. Cucurella just came off a pretty disappointing season where he really didn't show well defending or attacking, and there could be a possibility he's sold. Then Lewis Hall, very young player, but he did pretty well in the Premier League last year. And not like pretty well for a young player grading him on a curve. No, he was actually looking really good. Then Ian Matson had a very solid season on loan at Burnley where he helped them get promoted, and Burnley actually want to get him back. There are reasons to want to keep all of these players and reasons to want to ship them all out. Cucurella already shown that he might not be a player good enough for Chelsea. Lewis Hall looks like a very exciting young player, but him getting loaned out and having consistent playing time might be the best for him. And then Ian Matson's a bit of a risk with him being the only one not proven in the Premier League, and his height is a bit of a limiter on how good he can be. My thinking with this position is that Ian Matson is the biggest risk, so I think I'd be having him leave. If he can get loaned out to Burnley again, that's ideal, but if he has to be sold, I think that's what has to be sacrificed. I look at Cucurella, he's already proven himself to be a very good Premier League player, and there's a chance he can get that form back. And Lewis Hall's potential is just really good, and even if Cucurella isn't that strong, I feel good about playing Lewis Hall. With Ian Matson, when you lose him, you are losing a really high potential player. But this is Chelsea. Everybody has high potential. So with that, I feel like I'm most comfortable keeping the status quo and keeping Mark Cucurella and Lewis Hall on the team. Now, there is one more exit that I want to talk about, aside from goalkeeper, which we'll go more in depth with later, and that is Romelu Lukaku. I think Lukaku is a player who could do well under Pochettino. Pochettino has done well with more traditional number nines before. He got Ricky Lambert to a World Cup, and Harry Kane was not the complete player that he is now when he first burst through at Tottenham. I think that he would work very well with Romelu Lukaku, who has shown a ton of goal scoring potential in the Premier League in the past. But unfortunately, it seems like that bridge is burnt with Chelsea at the moment. I feel like he wants to leave, and similar to Mason Mount, because of that, I think that he should be allowed to go, so I won't be including Lukaku in the team, but he's another player who I feel like could do well under Pochettino. I think that's all of the exits that really need to be addressed for Chelsea. The team is down to 22 players, and it's the 22 players that I feel good about. Now, keep in mind, this is a team that finished 12th last year. There needs to be improvement, and signings need to be made. So before we go over the signings, I think you should go over the strengths and weaknesses of this Chelsea team to identify what needs to be signed. The back line is a big strength for Chelsea. Reece James and Ben Chilwell are top class fullbacks, and I don't think there needs to be a replacement for them. Now, Reece James does have injury issues, but I do like Malo Gusto as an option behind him, and I think that fullback is not an issue that needs to be signed. And then center back is good as well. Thiago Silva was one of the few bright spots for Chelsea last season, and looks like he'll be able to keep going this year. For his partner alongside him, there are a bit of issues. Benoit Badiashiel's dealing with an injury right now, Wesley Fofana's been hit or miss, and Levi Colwell is unproven. But I feel like one of them is going to break through, and I'm confident enough in that I don't feel like a center back needs to be signed. Plus, Trevor Chalobah is there as extra depth, so I think the back line is not an issue at all. Next, Enzo Fernandez and Christopher Nkunku are players to build around for Chelsea. Both are great options for them, and I feel very confident about having them in the team. Fernandez had a little bit of a rocky start, but I think he's demonstrated a ton of talent with his passing, and while I do think he needs to have a partner alongside him who's strong defensively, he's not weak in that area at all. He's shown a ton of talent at the World Cup, and I feel like he's a player to build around for the future. Then Christopher Nkunku, it's hard to say you should build around him without having seen him play for Chelsea, but he looks like an amazing option at that secondary striker role. Was one of the best players in the Bundesliga for the past few seasons, and someone I feel extremely confident in. Now, onto the weaknesses of this team. First is defensive midfield. With how many players are on their way out, there needs to be at least one signing made in that position, and it's a need that Chelsea look like they're trying to address at the moment. Then I think striker is a pretty big weakness for the squad. They did sign Nicholas Jackson, but I'm not sure if he's going to be the solution for them. And with goals being such a big issue, I really want to have somebody ahead of Christopher Nkunku, who's a really good and reliable goal scorer. Then I feel like one more winger is needed. I feel like some extra depth would really help this team, and maybe in bringing somebody who's a starter level player. And then with Mendy on his way out, I think a backup goalkeeper or possibly a starter is needed in that spot. Chelsea should be able to spend basically as much money as they want to this season. They sold a good amount of players, and it looks like Todd Bowley is willing to open up his checkbook. Also, keep in mind, financial fair play isn't real. None of these teams will actually be punished for overspending. Do you actually think that Man City will face any real consequences for their overspending? Maybe they won't be able to sign players for a window, but I don't think they're going to face any real consequences. And with that, I think Chelsea are free to spend just about as much money as they want. So I'm going to be limiting the amount of signings. Keep in mind a squad around 25. So we're going to be focusing on quality rather than quantity. In my opinion, the biggest issue for Chelsea is striker and putting goals in the back of the net. Now, they have spent around 30 million on Nicholas Jackson, a striker from Villarreal. And Jackson is 22 and he has a good amount of potential. He's shown a lot of skill with the ball at his feet, and in the last 8 games, he scored 9 goals in an amazing run. But outside of those 8 games, it was only 3 goals in 18 games during the league. And with him being a good technical striker who may have issues scoring, I don't think he's the true upgrade that Chelsea need. And I can't believe I'm saying this, with the relatively small fee of around 30 million. I feel like I need to take a shower after saying that. I don't think that's the end of the spending Chelsea will have at striker. Chelsea have been linked with Dusan Vlahovic, who's another good option. He comes from Juventus, where he's another player who's very good off the ball, good with the ball at his feet, good with his movement, and he has hit 20 goals in the past. However, he's been having a bit of a rough time lately at Juventus. Now, this is part to Allegri's more defensive tactics, but goals are the biggest issue, and he hasn't exactly been great at that. I think if we are looking at the Serie A, there's another striker who I'd like to go to, one where you know goals will come, Victor Osimhen. Victor Osimhen has been an insane goal scorer for Napoli this season, scoring 26 goals in 32 games, while outscoring an expressive on its own right 21 expected goals. With Osimhen, he's got great strength up top, but unlike Lukaku, he doesn't sacrifice any mobility for it. He's got great off-ball movement, always coming up with good goals in the box, and he's very strong dribbling when he gets on the ball. Now, he is somebody who needs service, but so does Erling Haaland. Now, Chelsea doesn't have Kevin De Bruyne, well, not anymore, but with Pochettino already having success with more traditional number nines, Christopher Nkunku behind him, Enzo Fernandez threading through passes, I feel very confident in Osimhen having success under Chelsea. Now, he is going to be very expensive, but I feel like Bully would be willing to open up the checkbook, and I feel confident in Victor Osimhen being somebody who can really improve this Chelsea team. The next signing that I want to make is in midfield, and this is going to be for a partner for Enzo Fernandez. Enzo Fernandez, great technical player, good at making those passes from deep, but I think he does need some help alongside him defensively. However, this can't just be a traditional six that gets signed. Enzo Fernandez likes to operate from deep, so we want to have somebody a bit further forward and more of a box to box defensive role. Now, unfortunately, N'Golo Kante looks like he's somebody who'd be a perfect partner for Fernandez, but he's injury prone, and as I mentioned before, he's already gone. And with that, Chelsea have been linked to one name in particular that I think would be a good signing alongside him: Moises Caicedo. Caicedo has everything you'd want for a partner for Fernandez. He's got athletic enough to keep up with strong counterattacks, good defensively, and good at progressing the ball forward as well. He's a very good player for him, and he was part of Brighton having a really strong season. Now, this is Chelsea signing another player from Brighton, and Cucurella didn't exactly work out. But guys like Trossard and Ben White and Dan Burn have all had success after leaving Brighton, so I don't think the system player argument would work too well. I feel confident in Caicedo. Now, one issue is the price tag that he has at about 80 million, and he might be getting in a bidding war with Chelsea and United, so that is liable to go up. And I've seen similar numbers floated for players like Nico Barella. So I was looking at other options at that position, but it does look like Chelsea feel good about spending this money on Caicedo, so I am going to keep him in the team. But when you look at the squad, it's still not exactly done with the depth. I mean, Caicedo, Fernandez, maybe Conor Gallagher, and Andre Santos, but I feel like another signing could be needed in case of injury. Youssouf Fofana, the French international from Monaco, is a very good option for Chelsea. While I was exploring alternatives for Caicedo before I was sure that Chelsea were going to sign him, he was a guy who I really identified as a great option. He's another really good physical presence, but he also has good ability to progress the ball up the field, and his dribbling is really impressive for how big he is and at that defensive midfield position. Now, I wasn't completely sold on him because he hasn't exactly been a standout player for Monaco. He hasn't really shown that he's better than the French league or anything like that. But with us already bringing in Caicedo and his relatively small price tag of 35 million, God, need that shower again. I feel good about bringing in Youssouf Fofana, and I feel like he's good depth for this Chelsea team that really needs in that midfield position. Another position I feel like that could be strengthened is the wing position. As it stands, Chelsea only has three options in this wing position: Raheem Sterling, Mudryk, and Madueke. Now, Sterling didn't have the best season last year, but before it, he had 5 straight seasons of 10 plus goals, and with a real team, I feel confident he's able to regain his form. Mudryk and Madueke, I feel like they have potential, but I feel like that's more potential, and they could look to bring in a better option, especially on right wing, where they are due another left footed player. And I feel like there's one option that would work very well under Pochettino, somebody who I've watched a lot: Michael Olise. Michael Olise had a great season with Crystal Palace, coming up with 11 assists, joint fourth in the league, in a Crystal Palace team that at times struggled for goals. He looks like a really talented player, being great with the ball at his feet, really creative, and comes up big in a ton of moments. In addition, I think he's a perfect fit under Pochettino. Christian Eriksen played a role at Tottenham where he'd be a winger, but he'd still be a creative presence coming inside a lot and threading through some good passes. I think Elise is the perfect fit in that role. In addition to being that creative guy who can go into the midfield, he can also take on players in that spot, beating players on the end line, putting in crosses. And I just feel like he's the perfect fit for this Chelsea team under Pochettino. Maybe it's because I've watched him so much and just know how good he can be. But I've seen a lot of other people say that Elise would be a good fit, and I have to agree. I think he'd be a great signing. I think he's ready to move up to the top six, and I think that he'd be a great player for Chelsea. One last signing for this team is going to be at goalkeeper. With Mendy leaving, another goalkeeper is needed to come into this team. Now, Kepa this season actually had a really solid year. His distribution is very good for this level, and I feel like his shot stopping was solid, statistically top 5 in the league, and he looked like a good, consistent presence. Now, you could argue that he's not world class, and I don't believe that he is. And if an Andre Onana or Diego Costa came into the team, I think that he would be an upgrade, but I just don't think that's necessary to shake up the squad even more than I already have. I think some continuity for this team would be good, and Kepa impressed enough that I don't think he needs to be replaced as a starter. However, a backup, and I mean a good backup, is needed. While Kepa has been very good this year, his early years at Chelsea are still in recent memory, and those were not good. I think the comparison that I'd use is something that I heard about Thierry Henry during a documentary about the Invincibles, and it was Arsenal players, I think Roberto Pires, saying that there would be times when Arsenal would be drawing 0-0 or they'd be down, and they'd just be worried, but then they'd realize, oh, Henry hasn't done anything special yet today. We're basically already up 1-0. We basically already have that equalizing goal. And it would always happen. He was just that great of a player. With Kepa, during that time, he was kind of the opposite, where every game Chelsea would start out down 1-0 because Kepa was going to make a mistake. Now, he has improved a ton since then, and I do feel confident enough keeping him as a starter in a team competing for a Champions League spot. But I think he does need a backup there, both for competition and as a break in case of emergency option in case he starts to revert back to that form. Currently, Chelsea have Bentinelli and Slonina as their backup keepers, and while Slonina has a ton of potential, neither of them are Premier League ready at the moment. Leeds and Southampton saw what happened when you trust too much in an experienced goalkeeper. And with that, I think a more experienced option who's ready to play in the Premier League should come in. And one name that I think would be very good is Keylor Navas. He's somebody who was pretty good at Forest last season. I don't think he was world class or anything, but when you look at the teams that got relegated last year, all of them had pretty bad goalkeepers, and Forest, well, they were able to stay up with Navas. I think that he was a big reason why. Now, Navas is comfortable being a backup keeper. He was at Madrid at times, he was at PSG at times, and while he may want to compete for a first team spot, I think bringing him in to be the backup and be competition to Kepa would be a very good signing. And with that, you can loan out Slonina, and I feel like the goalkeeper position and the rest of the team is done. With that, around 300 million was spent. Had Victor Osimhen, Moises Caicedo, Youssouf Fofana, Michael Olise, Keylor Navas, alongside Christopher Nkunku and Nicholas Jackson. Now that is a lot of money, but a lot of sales are going out, and honestly, that doesn't sound too ridiculous for a team under Todd Bowley. And with that team, I think I feel confident in the starting lineup of Kepa in goal, Thiago Silva at center back, alongside one of the other options. Batishill's currently dealing with an injury. Fofana and Colwill are options to compete for that spot in preseason. Then Reece James at right back, Ben Chilwell at left back. In midfield, you have Moises Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez. Michael Olise on one wing, Sterling on the other, Christopher Nkunku as the secondary striker, and Victor Osimhen up top. Osimhen and Nkunku and Sterling will all be good goal threats. I feel confident in Sterling regaining his form, and Nkunku and Victor Osimhen should be able to score goals no problem. Then on for depth, you've got Broha and Jackson, who should be able to come in and provide some goals, and Madueke and Mudryk are very good impact options coming off the bench. Olise will be a great creative presence on the wing, Fernandez should be able to keep working his magic in the midfield, and Caicedo will be able to help protect the defense. Gallagher is a good option coming in off the bench. He might have to play a little bit higher up the field, but I think that should be fine. Fofana is a good rotational option for Caicedo, and Andre Santos might just be able to have a breakout season. He's somebody to keep an eye on. Chilwell and James are really good options at that fullback position. Reece James and Michael Olise in particular, I think would have a really good partnership on that right-hand side. Gusto, I feel like, is a good option for James should he get hurt or need to rotate out the team. I think Marc Cucurella should be able to improve in his second season, but in case he doesn't, Lewis Hall is still in the squad, and if he needs extra playing time, Hall could sub in at midfield at times. Center back is very good with Thiago Silva leading the way. Benoit Badiashile should be able to impact the team once he returns from injury. Hopefully Wesley Fofana can return to his Leicester form, and maybe Levi Colwill could have a breakout season. In case some of those don't end up working out, Trevor Chalobah is another homegrown player in the team who could help cover for injuries, even at right back, but I'm really hoping to see Levi Colwill break out. I think this could be a really strong season for him. And then in goal, Kepa should be very solid with Keylor Navas there to help push him. So that's what I do with Chelsea to try to get them back into prominence. It was really interesting to see how bad of a collapse they had last year, so I want to talk about what I do to help improve the team. And I think if Chelsea are able to play their cards right, they should be competing for the title this season. Now, it's going to be tough to win it with how good Man City is, but I think with the right signings, they should be right back into being a good team. I think last year is going to go down as a bit of an anomaly. They had a similar season in 2016. So I'm really excited to see what Chelsea can do. I'm not a particular fan of them, but it's fun to see this league when it's at its best. And when the league's at its best, Chelsea are good. So I'm hoping they can turn things around. And yeah, that's all I got to talk about. See ya.